Welcome to Thread of Terror. We bring you the creepiest stories from Reddit. Dim the lights, grab a blanket, and hit subscribe so you never miss a scare. Story 1. The Little Girl in the Shadows.
I was 6 years old when I first saw it. Lying in the top bunk of my bedroom, I gazed toward the hallway where a dim nightlight cast long shadows. That was when I noticed it, an outline, the shadow of a little girl standing just barely out of view. I could not see her body, just the silhouette against the dim light. My breath hitched. I blinked, and she was gone. Hours later, I awoke in a different room, the downstairs living room, curled up on the couch. I had no memory of how I got there. The house was silent, except for the distant ticking of a clock. I felt no fear, just a strange emptiness like something was missing. Groggily, I got up and climbed the stairs back to my bed, pushing the unsettling moment to the back of my mind. Years later, my mother and I spoke about that house, and I mentioned the strange experience from my childhood. Her face paled. I always thought that house was haunted, she admitted. There were 2 ghosts there. One of them was a little girl, but no one ever saw her, only her shadow. My heart pounded. I had never told her about the shadow girl. Yet here she was, confirming something I had kept buried in my mind for years. Then she told me something even stranger. At the time of my encounter, my little sister, only 3 or 4 years old, had an imaginary friend, a little girl. I remember hearing her talking, in the dead of night, whispering and giggling in the darkness. And there was more. When our family first moved into that house, the contractors hired to do renovations refused to continue working. Some left after only an hour. Others lasted a day before quitting. They claimed something in the house unsettled them, though no one ever explained what they saw or felt. Then there was my brother's story. He was 7 when he claimed to have seen a blue man outside our bedroom window, only for the figure to shift and transform into a creature with glowing eyes and sharp teeth. He swore it looked like a werewolf, but who knows what he really saw. The little girl's shadow, the eerie presence, the workers fleeing. It all adds up to something deeply wrong with that house. I do not know who she was or what she wanted, but one thing is certain, we were never truly alone in that home.
Story 2. Something lived in that basement.
We were visiting my friend's house in Stillwater, Oklahoma, for a football game. 2 of us came to stay with him for the weekend. As we settled in, I noticed a door in the bedroom. His roommate casually mentioned that it was haunted and had a habit of opening on its own. My friend John, who frightens easily, made sure to shut it tightly and even moved a couch in front of it. The house's largest bedroom was spacious enough to have a lounge area, and that ominous door led to the basement. Strangely, despite having no outdoor access or windows, the basement door had 2 deadbolts. That alone sent a chill down my spine. That night happened to be daylight savings time. As we sat in the main living room, I remembered to ask about the house being haunted. Initially hesitant, they finally relented and shared the unsettling story. The girls who lived here before us warned that the house was haunted. At night, objects moved on their own and they would hear a little girl humming from the basement. Every time something eerie happened, the basement door would be found open. We dismissed it at first, but then strange things started happening to us too. Some mornings, we would find every kitchen cabinet wide open. We joked that it was our large roommate being careless, but only the 2 guys who live upstairs have claimed to hear the little girl, and every single time the basement door was open afterward. As he finished speaking, a large mirror on the wall behind the couch crashed onto the people sitting beneath it. I looked at my phone. It was exactly 2 a.m., the precise moment when daylight savings would have shifted the time to 3 a.m. We rushed to the bedroom and found the couch moved away from the wall. The basement door, which John had blocked, was now unlocked and standing ajar. We hesitated, but curiosity pushed us forward. Descending the stairs, we found only a small empty basement with stark white walls. Nothing else. No furniture, no storage, just silence. But somehow the air felt heavy, as if something unseen was watching us. That night changed me. I had never believed in ghosts before, but after what I experienced, I no longer have a choice.
Story 3. Ghost Boat of the Deep.
My family owns a cabin on one of the Great Lakes, a quiet retreat surrounded by dense woods and endless water. One day, my father and I decided to take the canoe out, paddling about 3/4 of a mile from shore. Beneath us, the lake stretched down nearly 800 feet, a vast, dark abyss. We were heading toward a small island about a mile offshore when we spotted something unusual. A boat, silent, drifting. It was about 100 yards away, a sailboat roughly 25 feet long. The sails hung limply, and there was no sign of anyone aboard. Curious, we rowed closer. My father called out, his voice carrying across the still water. No answer. The boat rocked gently, with the current, eerily lifeless. After a moment's hesitation, my father pulled our canoe alongside and carefully climbed aboard. I watched as he disappeared below deck for a few moments before emerging, his face pale. "There is no one here," he said. "No sign of an accident, no distress signals." But then, he gestured toward the back of the boat. There, neatly placed, were 3 life jackets, 2 adult-sized, 1 child-sized. A chill ran through me. Something about their placement felt deliberate, too orderly for a family that may have been in distress. There was no sign of struggle, no belongings scattered about, no overturned furniture, just an empty boat, and those life jackets waiting, as if their owners had stepped away only moments ago. We quickly made our way back to shore and reported the abandoned vessel to the authorities. They took down our statement, nodded seriously, and promised to investigate, but we never heard anything after that. No missing persons reports, no news articles. The boat, and whatever had happened to those aboard, seemed to vanish from all records. For years I have wondered about that sailboat. Did its passengers fall overboard? Did something unseen pull them into the depths? Or had they simply disappeared? Even now, when I visit the lake, I cannot help but scan the water, half expecting to see that ghostly boat drifting silently across the waves once more.
Story 4. The Ritual That Went Wrong.
About 10 years ago, I was deeply fascinated by magic and the occult. I joined a local coven, a small group of people who were kind though intense in their beliefs. The leader of our group became convinced that witches from a rival coven in the city were casting negative spells on us, attempting to bring misfortune to our town. One of her friends owned a small pagan shop, and according to her, this rival coven had harmed his pet after he refused to join them. Now she believed they had set their sights on us. To counteract this, she devised a plan, the first ominous sign. She had marked the houses of every coven member on a map, forming a perfect pentagram that encircled the entire town. The precision was unsettling. That night, at an hour when the streets were empty, 7 of us piled into an old, creaky car. The plan was to drive the route of the pentagram, stopping at each house to perform a protective ritual, and then circle the town's perimeter to seal the spell. We were singing, drumming, and passing around a bottle of mead. Spirits were high, but as the journey progressed, an uneasy feeling settled over us. By the second stop, the air felt heavy. I had never truly believed in magic, but for the first time I felt something cold and watching. Our leader whispered that the rival coven might be sending negative energy to disrupt us. The second ominous sign. At the final stop, I looked up at the sky. Through the thick clouds, 5 clear, starry lines had formed in the shape of a pentagram mirroring our path. My stomach twisted. By now, people felt ill, complained of unseen touches, and sensed eyes upon them. As we drove, an eerie tapping sound came from the windows. My closest friend, who claimed to see spirits, turned pale. "They are following us," she whispered. "Do not look." When we arrived at my house, she urged me to run straight to my door without glancing back. I obeyed, sprinting faster than I ever had. Looking back, it may have been a case of group hysteria, but deep down I still wonder, did we truly attract something that night?
Story 5. The Phantom in the Trailer.
Growing up, I spent most of my time at my grandparents' house. Every morning, my grandmother would drop me off at my parents' home so I could get ready for school. They lived in an old trailer that once belonged to my great-grandparents, both of whom had passed away. One morning, around 5 a.m., I opened the door leading to an added-on room with a wooden ramp. It had been built for my great-grandparents since they both needed wheelchairs. As I stood in the doorway, a small red dot caught my attention at the top of the ramp, like the burning tip of a cigarette. Thinking it was my father waiting for me, I called out. No response. I called again. Still nothing. Then the air changed. A strong scent of cigarette smoke filled the room, mixed with an unfamiliar yet overwhelming perfume. A deep, cold chill settled over me. Something was there. Panic took over, and I bolted up the ramp, my heart pounding as I ran past the glowing ember. It never flickered, never moved, just burned steadily in the dark. I rushed straight into my parents' bedroom, shaking my father awake. Later that day, when I told my family, they exchanged uneasy glances. My grandmother suggested it might have been my great-aunt, who had smoked the exact kind of cigarettes I described. She had passed away years ago, and I shared her birthday. Since that morning, strange occurrences have followed me wherever I have lived. Being home alone is never truly being alone. Cabinets open and close by themselves, the clatter of dishes echoes from the kitchen, only for me to find everything perfectly in place when I check. Cups fall, shatter, yet when I turn the lights on, there is no sign of broken glass. The faucet turns on and off by itself, but the sink remains dry. Now in my 30s, I have learned to live with it. I no longer try to explain the shadows in the corners of my vision, the whispers in empty rooms, or the cold spots that appear even in the summer heat. I have long accepted the eerie truth. Something has followed me, and it is never leaving.
Story 6. Something lived in their house.
When my sister and her husband moved into their new home after getting married, they experienced several months of pure terror. At first, the disturbances were minor. Doors creaking open by themselves, unexplained footsteps on the stairs, and strange drafts that carried an icy chill. Oddly enough, their cat seemed to sense something invisible in the house. One evening, while I was visiting, I watched in frozen disbelief as the cat sat motionless, staring at the living room door. Moments later, without any warning, the door flew open violently. No breeze, no loose hinges, and the handle did not even turn. It was as if something on the other side had forced it open with inhuman strength. They began jokingly referring to this unseen force as Ethel, but Ethel did not appreciate being mocked. Within weeks, the activity intensified. Every morning, my sister and her husband would wake up to find their dining room chairs had been rearranged, sometimes slightly moved, other times pushed across the room. One morning, they came downstairs to discover the entire dining table had shifted several feet from its usual position. The cat's behavior became increasingly disturbing. It would stare into empty corners, growling, its fur standing on end as if something unseen was looming nearby. The most horrifying event occurred late one evening. When my brother-in-law was in the upstairs guest room, the light flickered once and then went out with a soft pop. Annoyed, he went downstairs to grab a new light bulb, leaving the room for no more than 2 minutes. When he returned, his blood ran cold. A chair in the room had moved several feet from its original spot, but the real horror, the light bulb he had removed was gone. Not shattered, not on the floor, just completely missing. It was as if something had unscrewed it and taken it away. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the activity stopped. No more moving furniture, no more ominous door openings. To this day I struggle to explain what I witnessed. I do not believe in ghosts, yet the memory of those months lingers like a shadow. What was Ethel, and why did it leave so suddenly?
Story 7. Something in the dark pretended to be my mom.
When I was around 12 or 13 years old, I was in my bedroom one evening when I faintly heard my mother calling my name. Jiam. Yes, I responded. Silence. I waited a moment before calling out again. Yes. Still, there was no reply. Thinking I must have misheard, I stood up and walked toward my bedroom door, preparing to call out a third time. But before I could, my mother's voice rang out again, this time much louder and frantic. The urgency in her tone sent a chill down my spine. My heart pounded as I bolted out of my room and rushed downstairs, only to find myself standing in an empty living room. It was late in the evening, and the house was mostly dark except for the warm glow of a lamp in the living room and the streetlight casting faint shadows through the kitchen window. "Mum," I called out hesitantly. My voice trembled slightly. Why had she been yelling my name from the darkness? Was she playing a prank? I slowly approached the kitchen, peeking cautiously around the corner. "Mum." This time my voice was firm, demanding an answer. "Yes," she responded. From upstairs, I felt a jolt of terror rip through me. My mother had been upstairs the entire time. I sprinted back up the steps, practically crawling on all fours in my panic, knocking over a chair in my rush. My breath came in ragged gasps as I reached her room. "Why were you calling me?" I asked, my voice shaking. She frowned in confusion. "I did not call you." I stared at her, my skin crawling. "But I heard you downstairs. It was your voice." She shook her head. "I did not hear anything, not until you just called for me now." Then she hesitated before adding, "Although this morning around 5 o'clock I did hear music coming from downstairs, orchestra music. But when I went to check, it stopped. We lived in a remote area. No neighbors, no visitors. We were the only ones home that weekend. To this day, I do not know who or what called my name that night, but for a long time after that, I was too afraid to go downstairs alone in the dark."
Story 8. What we heard behind the locked door.
Last winter, my friends and I rented a cabin in Yosemite through a deal we found online. It was massive, complete with a game room, perfect for a weekend getaway. There were 7 of us, and after unpacking and checking out all 6 floors of the place, we decided to play a game of hide and seek to make things even more fun. During the second round, I was it. I had already found everyone except for my friend Pat. Searching the second to bottom floor, I reached a bedroom with a locked door. "Pat, I know you are in there. You cannot lock the door," I called out. No response. I pressed my ear against the door and froze. I could hear the faint creaking of bed springs, like someone shifting their weight. Then, the sound of footsteps pacing on the carpeted floor. It was subtle, almost hesitant. "Pat, I can hear you in there. Come out." Still, no response. 2 of my friends joined me, curious about the situation. They placed their ears to the door as well, and immediately backed away, their faces pale. They heard it too, the distinct sound of someone moving inside. We knocked and called out, growing uneasy when there was no reply. Then, from the very bottom floor, we suddenly heard Pat yell, "I am not in there." The three of us exchanged horrified glances. That room had been empty when we arrived, and we knew for certain we had not closed its door. Gripped with fear, we grabbed the nearest objects we could use as weapons, a knife and a golf club, before my friend managed to pick the lock. The door creaked open, revealing an untouched room. The bed was neatly made, the windows locked, and the closet empty. There was no sign of anyone ever having been inside. That night we abandoned our rooms and slept together on the upstairs floor, too afraid to be alone. The cabin had given off an unsettling feeling from the start, and after that incident, none of us could shake the sense that we had not been the only ones there.
Story 9. Unexplained paranormal events in my childhood.
I grew up in an apartment complex where strange and unsettling things happened all the time. As a child, I was mostly a solitary person. I spent my time away from others, breaking bottles or causing trouble alone. The area around my apartment was filled with bad energy, something I could feel every time I passed by. Over the 6 years I lived there, around 15 people either died or were killed in that same apartment complex. Even now, when I walk near that place, I feel a heavy, negative presence. One evening, I was playing with a scoreboard toy, seeing how high I could get the score. As I reached 66, I felt a strange, intense energy that I couldn't explain. I tried to ignore it, but as I got closer to 99, I suddenly felt as though something dark and sinister was watching me. The feeling was so intense that it still sends chills down my spine to this day. Another time, I was jumping on a mattress in my room while my mum was talking to her sister. As I flipped off the bed and landed, I looked up and saw a tall, shadowy figure standing in the doorway. I quickly buried my face in the mattress, thinking it was a trick of the light. When I looked up again, the figure was gone. A few years later, one of my friends, Gwen, moved into the apartment next door. She started seeing shadowy figures in her home, often feeling as though something was moving toward her bed. She moved out not long after. Then another friend, Mia, moved into the apartment next to the one I used to live in. She told me that there was strange activity in the house, and a Ouija board had been left in the attic. No one dared touch it, but the paranormal events continued. In the summer of 2016, while I was heading to Augusta to visit a friend, I received a message that Mia's house had burned down. That was the last major incident I know of from that complex, but the energy there still feels wrong. Even now, just looking at my old apartment gives me an uneasy feeling. If I could, I would ask my mum to share her side of the story. She has her own unsettling experiences from living there too.
Story 10. The unseen terror in the group home.
My first job was working the night shift at a group home for adults with moderate intellectual disabilities. The house, which was allegedly haunted, gave off a strange and unsettling energy from the moment I arrived. To describe the layout briefly, the house had 5 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a long rectangular shape. The living room was at the front, followed by the dining room and kitchen. A small bedroom/office was across from the dining area, and a long hallway led to the back master bedroom. The laundry area was tucked away at the very start of the hallway next to the kitchen. One night, early into my shift, I was sitting on the couch in the living room, positioned in the middle of the room where I could see part of the dining room and the kitchen. My co-worker was sitting to my right, against the wall, unable to see anything around her. We both heard a loud crash, as though something had fallen. I didn't hear a door open, or the usual sounds of someone walking out, which was strange because sometimes the clients would wander into the living area at night. After a brief moment of confusion, I got up to check, but what I found froze me in place. The laundry basket, which had been sitting on top of the dryer, was now sitting right in the middle of the hallway, a good distance away from its original spot. I could feel the air growing thick and heavy. I told my coworker that I wasn't going over there, and we both sat in silence for nearly 20 minutes before I had to check the clients' beds and put the basket back. Later that shift, while I was again sitting in that same spot, the temperature dropped suddenly and sharply, sending a chill down my spine. It felt as though the room itself was alive, pressing in on me. There was also the time when I heard a loud crash from the vacant room next to the office. The blinds had fallen off the wall, but we didn't realize what had happened until morning when the light revealed the destruction. These events, combined with the already unnerving nature of the job, made me question whether it was really worth $8 an hour. The presence in the house was undeniable, and it left me with a feeling of constant dread, knowing something unseen was always watching.
Thanks for joining us on this terrifying adventure. If tonight's story gave you chills, let us know in the comments below and share your own scary experiences too. Don't forget to leave a like if you want more nightmares and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, sleep tight and remember, not all shadows are empty.